lady abandoned by her legitimate children, was helped by a beggar girl. Before we dive into the story, take a moment to reflect on where you're tuning in from. Let us know in the comments. This journey we're about to embark on is one of deep emotions, unexpected twists, and a bond that will change the lives of two unlikely souls. Enjoy the experience. In the quiet suburban streets of Willow Creek, Emily Harper sat alone by the window of her small, weathered house, watching the leaves of autumn dance in the breeze. The once lush trees that surrounded her home now stood like quiet sentinels, their branches bare and reaching for the sky in a silent plea for renewal. The house, once full of life and laughter, now echoed only the sound of her own thoughts. At 65, Emily had devoted her entire life to raising her children. Her three beloved children who had long since grown and scattered across the country, leading their own lives. The house had once been filled with the warmth of family dinners, the hustle and bustle of school projects, and the chaotic joy of birthdays. But now, there was nothing but silence. Nothing but the distant hum of the world moving on without her. She reached for the faded photo album on the table next to her, flipping through the pages filled with memories. Her husband, George, had passed away 3 years ago, leaving her with the burden of a house that no longer felt like a home. Her children, Thomas, Richard, and Claire, had become distant, as if the years they had spent together had been erased from their memories. Thomas, the eldest, now lived in a different state and barely made the effort to visit. Richard, always the rebellious one, had stopped calling altogether, and Claire, her only daughter, seemed to have forgotten the woman who had once held her in her arms. It wasn't that Emily was upset with them. No, she had always known that they would leave one day, grow up, start families of their own. But the abandonment, the distance, the coldness, it all felt like a betrayal. She wasn't asking for much, just a simple phone call, a visit, a sign that they still remembered her. But those calls never came. Her phone buzzed, a fleeting moment of hope. But when she glanced at the screen, it was another spam message. With a sigh, she stood up, her joints protesting as she made her way to the kitchen. It wasn't much, but she had learned to find comfort in the small things. The smell of fresh brewed coffee, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall. She had become accustomed to living in solitude. But sometimes, the silence was unbearable. On this particular afternoon, Emily decided to walk to the local market to pick up some groceries. It wasn't a long walk, but it was something. A reason to leave the house, to breathe the fresh air, to feel like she was still part of the world outside. As she stepped out the door, the crisp autumn air greeted her with a sharp chill. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders and began the slow walk to the market, the crunch of fallen leaves beneath her feet, the only sound that accompanied her. As she approached the market, Emily noticed a young woman sitting on the steps outside. The woman was scruffy, her clothes ragged and torn, her hair a tangled mess. Her face was pale, and her eyes, sad, searching, met Emily's gaze. "Excuse me, ma'am," the young woman said, her voice soft but desperate. "Could you spare some change? Just a little, please. I haven't eaten in days." Emily hesitated. She had seen many people like this before, strangers on the street asking for help, but something about this woman's eyes stopped her in her tracks. There was no arrogance, no sense of entitlement in her voice, just pure need. Without thinking, Emily reached into her purse and pulled out a few crumpled bills. She handed them to the woman, who looked up at her with a mix of gratitude and surprise. "Thank you," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say. I haven't had a meal in days." Emily nodded, her heart aching for the young woman. There was something familiar about her, something about the way she carried herself, as though she too knew the sting of abandonment. "You're welcome," Emily said softly, her eyes searching the woman's face. "Are you okay?" The woman didn't answer at first, and for a moment, Emily wasn't sure she would. But then, with a deep breath, the young woman looked down at her hands and said, "I've been living on the streets. I lost my job. Then I lost my place to stay. It's been hard." Emily felt a surge of compassion. In that moment, she wasn't just looking at a stranger. She was seeing someone who, like her, had known hardship. Emily had spent years caring for her children, always giving, always putting others first. And now, she realized, she wasn't the only one who had been abandoned by life. "I'm sorry," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "I know what it's like to feel lost." The young woman raised her eyes, and for the first time since their conversation began, Emily saw a flicker of something, hope, perhaps, or maybe just the belief that someone cared. "My name is Clara," the young woman said quietly. "And you are?" "Emily," she replied with a soft smile. "Emily Harper." Clara stood up slowly, as if the simple act of standing was an accomplishment in itself. "Thank you, Emily. I don't have much to offer. But if you ever need someone to talk to, I'll be around." Emily didn't know why, but something in Clara's voice made her believe that the young woman meant every word. She had no reason to trust a stranger, yet she felt a connection, something deep and undeniable. "Maybe I will," Emily said, her voice uncertain but full of warmth. "Maybe we both need someone to talk to." With that, Emily turned to head into the market, but as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this brief encounter was only the beginning of something much larger. Clara, the young woman with no home, had just stepped into her life. And despite her best efforts to keep her emotions locked away, Emily couldn't help but wonder if this was the first step toward healing. Could this unexpected encounter lead to something more? Or would the walls of solitude that Emily had built around herself remain impenetrable as ever? As the door of the market closed behind her, Emily's heart felt lighter than it had in years. As Emily made her way through the aisles of the market, her mind kept returning to Clara. The brief interaction had left a mark on her, a tiny spark of something she hadn't felt in years. It was a strange feeling, one that was both foreign and familiar, like an old memory that had slipped through the cracks of her mind and resurfaced unexpectedly. She tried to focus on her shopping, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the young woman on the steps. Emily had spent so much of her life giving to others, raising children, taking care of a husband, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for, to matter to someone outside of her family. And now, here was Clara, a person with nothing to give, yet offering a glimpse of companionship. Emily paused at the dairy section, her hand hovering over a carton of milk, but her mind was elsewhere. How could a stranger make her feel something she hadn't felt in so long? She had no answers, but as she picked up the milk, she felt an undeniable pull to return to the steps where she had first met Clara. No sooner had Emily stepped out of the market than she noticed the young woman was still there, sitting with her head down, as though waiting for the world to pass her by. Her heart ached. She walked slowly toward Clara, the weight of her age and the time spent alone making her feel like every step took more effort than it should. When Clara lifted her head and saw Emily approaching, a glimmer of recognition danced in her eyes. "Hey," Emily said gently, unsure of what she was doing but driven by a deep, almost maternal instinct. "I thought you might like some coffee, or something warm. It's getting cold out here." Clara seemed surprised for a moment, then nodded, standing up carefully. I'd like that," she murmured. Her voice still trembled, but there was a new openness in her gaze, as if the kindness from Emily had cracked open a door she'd been afraid to open herself. They walked together to Emily's house, the air between them filled with an unspoken understanding. Emily didn't ask too many questions, letting Clara lead the conversation when she was ready. Clara's story came out in pieces, small confessions like drops of water from a broken faucet. She'd grown up in foster care, had never known a stable home, and after losing her job at a small diner, she had ended up on the streets without a plan or a place to go. Emily listened quietly, her heart aching for the young woman. She recognized something in Clara's eyes that mirrored her own, an exhaustion, a weariness that came from years of not knowing where you belonged. They sat down at the kitchen table, the coffee warming their hands, and Clara finally spoke again, her voice softer now. "I never thought I'd end up like this," she said, staring into her cup. I thought I'd have a better life, you know. I thought things would turn around, but they didn't. Emily nodded slowly, her own thoughts drifting back to her children. She hadn't expected to be alone at her age either, but here they both were, two women, one young, one old, finding themselves on the edges of a world they no longer understood. "You know," Emily began, her voice unexpectedly firm, "it's never too late to start again. I've spent so many years taking care of everyone else. I didn't realize that I was losing myself in the process. You're still young, Clara. You have time to figure things out." Clara looked at her, the faintest hint of hope appearing in her eyes. "You really think so?" "I know so," Emily said, a soft smile curving her lips. "We all need a second chance." But as the evening wore on, Emily began to sense the unease in the young woman. Clara shifted in her seat, glancing nervously at the door as though waiting for something. Or someone. Emily took a deep breath, feeling that familiar tightness in her chest, the discomfort of loneliness creeping back in. She didn't want Clara to leave. She didn't want to be alone again. But she knew that she couldn't force someone to stay. And Clara had her own battles to face, her own path to walk. Still, Emily wasn't ready to let go yet, not after such a brief but profound connection. As the night drew to a close, Emily reached out and touched Clara's hand. "I don't know what tomorrow holds," she said quietly, "but you don't have to face it alone. Not if you don't want to." Clara's eyes filled with emotion, but she didn't say anything at first. After a long moment, she squeezed Emily's hand in return. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. "I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the coffee in front of them. "I'm doing this because I remember what it's like to need someone," she said. Clara stood, gathering her things. And before she left, she turned to Emily with a final, lingering glance. "I'll be back tomorrow," she said, her voice firm now. "I promise." And with that, she left, disappearing into the night. Emily watched her go, a sense of hope settling in her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel so invisible. But as Clara walked away, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much more complicated. She had already given Clara something, her time, her kindness, but there was something else, something deeper, that pulled her to this young woman. Was it empathy, compassion, or something more? In any case, Emily couldn't deny it. She felt more alive than she had in years. The following morning, Emily awoke to a strange warmth in her heart. It wasn't just the sunlight streaming through her bedroom window, or the smell of fresh coffee brewing in the kitchen. It was something more intangible, something she hadn't felt in a long time, the spark of connection. She had reached out to Clara the day before, and now she was waiting for the young woman to return. But even as she sat down at the breakfast table, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Emily knew that something had shifted, something that could either bring joy or lead to heartache. She wasn't naive. Life had taught her enough lessons in the ways of disappointment and loss, but the glimmer of hope she'd felt after Clara's departure the night before refused to fade. It had been years since she'd opened up to someone in the way she had with Clara. A simple conversation had unlocked something deep inside her, a longing for companionship, for a purpose beyond the walls of her home. Emily had given so much of herself to others over the years, and now, in her twilight years, she was beginning to wonder if there was still time to receive something in return. As the day stretched on and the hours passed, Emily found herself checking the clock again and again. Where was Clara? Had something happened? Had she changed her mind? By the time the afternoon rolled around, Emily's patience began to wear thin. She was about to give up hope when there was a soft knock on the door. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She rushed to the door, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. Clara stood on the other side, her face slightly drawn, her eyes avoiding Emily's gaze. "Clara," Emily said, her voice warm but laced with concern. "I was starting to worry." Clara gave a half-hearted smile, but Emily noticed the weariness in her eyes. "Sorry, I didn't mean to worry you. I just needed some time to think." Emily nodded, stepping aside to let Clara in. She didn't push. She knew better than to force someone to open up before they were ready. Instead, she motioned for Clara to sit down at the kitchen table. "I understand," Emily said softly. "We all need time to think." Clara sat, her hands nervously wringing together as she stared at the table. There was an awkward silence between them as Emily prepared the coffee once more. But Emily could feel that something wasn't right. The shift in Clara's demeanor was too noticeable to ignore. Something was weighing on her. I don't know what to say," Clara began, her voice quiet and strained. "You've been kind to me, more than anyone has been in a long time. But I don't want to take advantage of your generosity. I can't keep coming here, asking for help. I'm not some charity case." Emily put the coffee pot down slowly, her gaze steady on Clara. "You're not a charity case, you're a person, Clara, and you've got a lot to offer more than you realize." But Clara shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I'm not so sure about that. I've made so many mistakes in my life, and now I'm paying for them. I don't even know how to get out of this mess." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She knew that feeling all too well, being trapped by mistakes, weighed down by regrets, unable to see a way out. It was as if the walls of her own life had closed in, leaving no room for redemption or escape. But Emily refused to let Clara sink into that dark place, the place where self-doubt and despair clouded everything. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," Emily said firmly. "One step at a time. I've been there, Clara. I've made mistakes too, but we don't need to figure everything out all at once. What we need is each other." Clara looked at Emily, her expression softening slightly, but there was still a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't know if I can let anyone in again. I've been hurt too many times." Emily's heart tightened. She understood that fear. It wasn't just the fear of rejection. It was the fear of letting someone else in and being vulnerable again. But sometimes, Emily thought, it was worth the risk. "I know it's hard," Emily said quietly. "But you don't have to go through this alone." Clara hesitated, then finally nodded. Maybe I'll give it a try. I don't know if I can be what you need, but I'll try." Emily's smile was small, but it was full of reassurance. "That's all I'm asking for, just a try." But as the conversation shifted back to lighter topics, Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something deeper was at play. Clara was not just fighting external struggles, she was fighting something inside herself. And Emily knew, deep down, that this bond they were beginning to form wasn't just about offering help. It was about healing old wounds. For both of them. Later that evening, as Emily prepared a simple dinner for the two of them, her thoughts wandered back to her children. She had tried over the years to reach out to them, to be a part of their lives. But the distance between them had only grown. She had been nothing more than a distant memory in their busy, full lives. Emily's heart hurt when she thought about them. Thomas, Richard, and Claire, how they had all drifted so far from her. But then she looked at Clara, sitting at her table, and something shifted. Clara was here. Clara needed her. Clara, despite her own pain and turmoil, had made the choice to come back. And in that moment, Emily realized that family wasn't just about blood. It was about connection. It was about showing up, being there, and offering a part of yourself when the world seemed too cold. Dinner passed in quiet conversation, and when Clara finally left for the night, Emily stood at the door, watching her walk down the path toward the street. There was a flicker of hope in Clara's posture now. She wasn't walking away, not anymore. But Emily couldn't ignore the undercurrent of tension in the air. Her children, especially Thomas, would never understand why she was helping this young woman. They would see it as a threat. They would accuse her of wasting her time, of neglecting them. And Emily could feel it in her bones. The first crack in the foundation of her family's relationship had begun to show. The days that followed Clara's return to Emily's home were filled with a strange mix of hope and tension. Emily couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Clara, but there was always a shadow hanging over them. Her family, her children. They hadn't called in days, and Emily found herself growing more and more anxious, her mind swirling with questions. Why hadn't they reached out? Was it because of Clara? Or was it simply because they were too busy to care? Her mind raced as she went about her daily routine. She made the bed, dusted the shelves, and folded the laundry, all the while fighting the sinking feeling in her chest. Thomas, Richard, and Claire, they had been her life. But the truth was, they had become strangers to her over the years. Their calls had grown fewer. And when they did visit, it was more out of obligation than genuine desire. And now, Clara had entered her life like a breath of fresh air, a reminder of what it felt like to care for someone, to be needed. But as much as Emily cherished Clara's company, she knew there would be consequences. Her children wouldn't understand. They would see it as a threat. That afternoon, Emily received a call from Thomas. "Mom," his voice was flat, distant. "We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't often that Thomas called without a reason. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice soft, almost tentative. "We need to talk about this." "This woman you've been spending time with," he said. "Clara, right?" Emily's heart sank. "Thomas, she's just someone I'm trying to help. She doesn't have anywhere else to go." "I know what she's been through," Thomas cut in, his voice rising slightly. "But it's just not right. Mom, you're getting involved with someone who has her own issues. We're concerned about you. You're not getting any younger, and you're just inviting trouble into your life." Emily's chest tightened at his words. She had expected resistance, but the harshness in his tone caught her off guard. It felt like a slap in the face. She had dedicated her life to her children, done everything she could to give them a good life, and now they were questioning her motives. "I'm not asking for your permission, Thomas," she said, her voice firmer now. "I'm trying to help her, and if you don't understand that, then maybe it's time you respect my decision." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Emily could hear him breathing, the weight of the conversation pressing down on both of them. "I just don't want you getting hurt, Mom," Thomas finally muttered. "I don't want to see you taken advantage of." "Taken advantage of?" Emily repeated, her heart pounding. "I'm not a child, Thomas. I know what I'm doing." She could feel the anger bubbling up inside her, but she pushed it back. She wasn't going to let her son make her feel small. She wasn't going to let him dictate how she lived her life anymore. "I'll be fine," Emily added, her voice quieter now. "I can take care of myself." "I hope so," Thomas said, his voice cold. "We'll talk soon, Mom, but think about what you're doing." The line clicked, and the silence that followed was deafening. Emily stood there for a long moment, staring at the receiver in her hand. Her son was worried about her, but it wasn't just concern. It was control. He didn't want her to change, didn't want her to let anyone else in. She had always been the strong, dependable mother, the one who kept everything together. But now, for the first time in years, she was questioning what it meant to be together. Was it really worth sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of their comfort? Later that evening, Clara arrived at the house, her tired face lit up by a faint smile when she saw Emily standing by the door. "Hi, Clara," Emily greeted her, trying to push aside the discomfort she felt after the call with Thomas. She needed Clara's presence right now, more than ever. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." Clara stepped inside, her usual hesitation still there, but tempered with a sense of warmth toward Emily. They exchanged a few words about the day, but Emily could tell Clara sensed that something was off. Clara had an uncanny ability to pick up on Emily's emotions, perhaps because she too was used to hiding her true feelings behind a mask of politeness. Clara stopped in the middle of the kitchen and looked at Emily, her brow furrowing slightly. "Is everything okay?" Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping. She didn't want to burden Clara with her own frustrations, but something about Clara's presence made it impossible to keep her feelings bottled up. "It's just my son," Emily started, her voice heavy. "Thomas, he called today. He's upset about me helping you. He doesn't understand. They never understand." Clara looked down at her hands as if trying to find the right words. "I didn't mean to cause any problems, Emily. I don't know what I would have done without you." "You didn't cause any problems," Emily replied quickly. shaking her head. It's just my family. They think they know what's best for me. They don't see me anymore. They don't understand that I still have a life, that I still have needs. Clara hesitated, then took a step closer. You're not alone anymore, Emily. I may not have much to offer, but I'm here, and I care, I really do. For a moment, the world seemed to fall away. Emily's heart swelled with emotion, a deep sense of connection she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the kind of love she had hoped for from her children, but it was love nonetheless, a love that was untainted by obligation or expectation. But even as they stood there, the familiar weight of Emily's reality pressed down on her. Her children, especially Thomas, were not going to let this go easily. There would be more fights, more tension. The battle lines had been drawn. That night, as Clara left for the evening, Emily stood by the window, watching her walk down the path. The cold wind bit at her skin, but she didn't feel it. She felt something stronger, an inner warmth, a quiet resolve. Her family would not understand. They would fight her every step of the way. But for the first time in a long while, Emily was no longer afraid to stand up for herself. The foundation of her family was cracking, and there was no turning back. The sun had barely risen the next morning when Emily heard the sharp ring of the phone. It was Thomas again. She sighed, her heart already heavy with the weight of the conversation she knew was coming. She let it ring for a few moments, trying to steady herself, but her resolve was already weakening. Finally, she answered. Hello? Her voice was still thick from sleep, but she tried to sound as steady as possible. Mom, we need to talk, Thomas said immediately, his voice clipped. Again. Emily's stomach tightened. She knew exactly what this was about. What's on your mind, Thomas? There was a brief pause before he spoke again, as though he were trying to choose his words carefully, but the impatience in his tone was unmistakable. I've been thinking about this a lot, about Clara, and I can't just ignore it anymore, Mom. You're letting someone who's practically a stranger get too close. What if she's using you? Emily's chest tightened. The same old suspicion, the same doubts. He had never truly trusted anyone outside of their immediate circle. She had always tried to explain to him that life wasn't so black and white, but he wouldn't listen. He never did. I don't know what you want me to say. Thomas, Emily said, her voice firm. She's been nothing but kind to me, and whether you like it or not, she's a part of my life now. Mom, I know you're lonely, but this is not the solution. You need to be careful. We can't just let anyone walk into our lives and take advantage of you, Thomas continued. His words tinged with concern, but there was also something else, something she didn't want to acknowledge. There was something in his tone that made her feel small, as if he were the one looking out for her, not the other way around. I'm fine, Thomas, she said, forcing herself to sound more confident. I'm not a child. I can make my own decisions. Another silence stretched between them before Thomas spoke again, softer this time. I'm just worried, Mom. We all are. And just like that, Emily knew. The cracks were widening, and there was no easy way to mend them. The loyalty her children once had for her was slowly eroding. They couldn't see the changes that had come over her, couldn't understand why she was doing what she was doing. But Clara could. I'll be fine, Emily repeated, though she didn't feel fine. She couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that something was being lost in all of this, and she wasn't sure how to hold on to it anymore. The conversation ended with more hollow promises of talking things through, but Emily knew that things were different now. Thomas wasn't going to back down. His worries had turned into accusations, and his love had transformed into control. As Emily hung up the phone, a quiet knock echoed at her door. She opened it to find Clara standing on the other side, a basket of groceries in her arms. Her tired face was soft, understanding, but there was a subtle, unspoken tension between them. Good morning, Clara greeted her, stepping inside when Emily stepped aside. Morning, Emily replied, her voice low. How was your night? Quiet, Clara said, placing the basket on the counter. I was thinking about what you said last night, about your family. I don't want to be the cause of any more stress for you, Emily. Emily shook her head, walking into the kitchen and grabbing a mug. Don't worry about it. They're concerned. They think they know what's best for me. Clara paused for a moment, then joined her at the counter. It's hard when people you love don't understand you, isn't it? Emily nodded, her eyes on the cup in her hands. It is. But it's harder when they think they can control your choices. I've spent my entire life doing what they wanted me to do, and now I'm trying to do what feels right for me. I can't pretend to know what you're going through, Clara said softly. But I do know what it's like to feel like you don't matter, to feel invisible. It's like you're being erased. Emily looked at Clara, her heart swelling. You don't have to pretend, Clara. I see you. I see you in a way they don't. For a moment, the weight of the words hung between them like a fragile thread, a delicate bond forming that neither of them was sure could be broken. But just as the quiet moment settled, a car pulled up outside. The sound of a door slamming and voices echoing from the driveway made Emily's pulse quicken. She knew who it was. Her children. Before Emily could say anything, the front door swung open with force, and Thomas, followed by Richard and Claire, stepped inside without so much as a knock. Mom, Thomas said, his voice sharp, we need to talk. Emily stood up straighter, her heart pounding in her chest. There it was, the confrontation she'd been expecting. The pressure of their disapproval had finally arrived. She could feel Clara's presence beside her, an anchor in a storm she hadn't asked for, but one she knew was now her reality. What is this, Thomas? Emily asked, her voice shaking slightly with the mix of fear and defiance. Why are you here? Thomas didn't mince words. We've been talking and we don't like what we've seen. This friendship with Clara, it's not healthy, Mom. You're letting someone take over your life. Clara stepped forward, her gaze meeting Thomas's. I'm not taking anything from Emily, Clara said, her voice steady. I'm here because she helped me, because she saw me when no one else did. Emily's heart skipped a beat at the words. Clara was defending her, but the tension in the room was palpable, thick with unspoken accusations and fear. Thomas's jaw tightened. And what does she want from you, Mom? What's her end game? What's she after? The accusation stung, and Emily felt a surge of anger rising in her chest. This wasn't just about Clara. This was about them. About her children trying to force her back into a mold she no longer fit. I've had enough of this, Emily said, her voice rising. I'm not your puppet anymore. I'm not a possession for you to control. I'm still your mother, but I have a right to choose who I spend time with. The room fell silent. No one knew how to respond to Emily's words, not even Clara. The truth had been laid bare, and it was a truth none of them were ready to face. But it was too late now. The rift had widened, and the walls that had once held them together were crumbling. The air in the house felt different that evening, charged like the quiet before a storm. Emily stared at her reflection in the kitchen window, her hand gripping the edge of the counter as if it could hold her together. Thomas, Richard, and Claire had left in a huff after the confrontation, their angry words lingering in the air like an acrid perfume. They didn't understand. They couldn't. And maybe, just maybe, they never would. But Clara had stayed. She was sitting in the corner of the room, quietly folding the laundry Emily had been too tired to finish earlier in the day. There was something about Clara's calm, steady presence that made Emily feel less alone in this shifting world. Still, despite the connection, Emily could feel the weight of her children's anger pressing down on her chest. Are you okay? Clara's voice broke through the thick silence, soft and comforting. Emily looked over her shoulder, a small smile tugging at her lips. I don't know anymore, Clara. I just don't know. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken. This is harder than I thought it would be. Clara put the last piece of clothing into the laundry basket and stood up. It's always hard when you have to make a decision that goes against everyone's expectations, especially when those people are your own family. Emily turned to face her fully now, her brow furrowed. I never thought I'd be in this position. You know, choosing between my family and you. She swallowed, feeling the sting of those words. I never thought it would come to this. Clara took a step closer, her eyes soft with understanding. I never meant for it to come to this. I don't want to cause you any more pain. I just wanted... Emily's heart clenched. Clara didn't have to finish the sentence. They both knew what she had wanted. A chance. A safe place. A family, of sorts. She had found that in Emily, and Emily had found something in her as well. A sense of being needed, of being seen. I know, Emily whispered. I know. The moment was interrupted by the sound of the front door slamming open. The familiar, dreaded voices of her children echoed from the hallway. Emily's heart sank. They had returned, but this time, their footsteps were not the hurried retreat of people who had been defeated. They were purposeful, filled with resolve. Thomas stepped into the living room first, followed by Richard and Claire. The looks on their faces were grim, but Emily could tell they weren't here for a simple discussion. No, this time they had come with something else in mind. We need to talk, Thomas said, his voice colder than it had been that morning. This is getting out of hand, Mom. Clara stood up immediately, a protective instinct surging through her. Emily could feel her tension, the way she braced herself for whatever was about to unfold. I've told you before, Thomas. This is my life, Emily said, her voice tight. She didn't want to do this, didn't want to face the harshness in her children's eyes, but she knew there was no going back now. You need to understand that. I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I've made my choice. Thomas's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. You don't understand what you're doing, Mom. You're choosing a stranger over your own flesh and blood. You're letting her manipulate you. And I'm not going to stand by and watch this happen. Clara stepped forward, her voice firm but calm. I'm not here to manipulate anyone. I'm here because Emily opened her door to me when no one else did. She showed me kindness when I had nothing. Claire crossed her arms, shaking her head. And now you've made her blind to everything that really matters. You're not family. You're just taking advantage of her. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, the sting of her children's accusations threatening to overwhelm her. But Clara, she noticed, didn't flinch. She didn't back down. Instead, she held her ground, looking each of them in the eye. No, Clara said softly but firmly. I'm not taking advantage of anyone. I'm giving back. And I'll continue to be here whether you like it or not. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emily couldn't even breathe. She had never seen Clara so resolute before. She was standing up for herself, for Emily, in a way that Emily had never been able to do for herself. Not with her children. Thomas stepped closer to Clara, his eyes flashing with frustration. You're not welcome here. This has gone on long enough. For a moment, Emily was afraid. Afraid of what might happen if the tension snapped, if the words became actions. But just as the storm seemed about to break, Richard stepped forward, his voice quieter than Thomas's but no less serious. Let's just calm down, Richard said, his hands up in a placating gesture. Mom, we're not saying you can't have friends, but Clara, she's different. We don't trust her. Emily's mind raced. How had things gotten this far? Why couldn't they see? She looked at Clara, who was standing tall beside her unbowed. She had given so much of herself to her children over the years, but Clara had given her something they hadn't, genuine care without strings attached. I'm not asking you to trust Clara, Emily said, her voice shaking slightly. But the anger in her tone was unmistakable. I'm asking you to trust me. This is my life, my decision. And if you can't accept that, then we have a bigger problem than I thought. Thomas's face reddened with anger. I won't sit here and let you be manipulated, Mom. I won't. Clara's voice was a quiet strength. You don't have to sit here, Thomas, but I'm not going anywhere. Emily looked at Clara, her heart swelling with gratitude, with a sense of security that she hadn't known in years. But as much as she wanted to hold on to this new bond, she knew it would come at a cost. It was clear now this was a test of loyalty, a test of trust, and Emily was about to make a choice that would change everything. Clara is staying, Emily said firmly. And if that's something you can't accept, then I don't know where we go from here. The room went quiet. The tension was unbearable, but Emily knew she had done what she needed to. She had stood up for herself, for both of them, but in her heart a new, uncertain fear took root. How long could she hold on to this fragile peace? The days that followed were a quiet storm, a heavy weight in the air that Emily could never shake off. Each morning, as the sun crept over the horizon, she felt the tension in her home like an invisible presence, hovering between her and her children. They had left that day with angry words, but they had not let go. No, they were not finished with her yet. She could feel their eyes on her even when they weren't there. But Clara had been a rock. She had stayed beside her, offering gentle words of reassurance when the guilt started to creep in, when Emily began questioning her choices. Yet there was something else too, something unspoken, something stronger in Clara's presence. Emily wasn't sure what to call it, but she recognized it now more than ever. Clara was more than just a companion. She had become a part of the fabric of her life in a way no one else had in years. One morning, as Emily walked through the house, making her way to the kitchen, she found Clara standing at the window, her gaze distant. Emily watched her for a moment, unsure of what to say. There was a quiet sadness in Clara's eyes, something that hadn't been there before. "Clara?" Emily's voice was soft, hesitant. "Are you okay?" Clara turned, offering a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine, just thinking," she said, though her words didn't hold the usual warmth. Emily walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You know, you don't have to stay if it's too much. If my family makes you uncomfortable, I understand." Clara shook her head, a firmness returning to her expression. "I've decided, Emily. I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. But I think we both know things are only going to get worse." The truth of her words hit Emily like a sudden gust of wind. The storm wasn't just coming. It was already here, and she couldn't stop it no matter how much she wanted to. That evening, the inevitable happened. Thomas, Claire, and Richard returned, but this time it wasn't a simple confrontation. They had come with an ultimatum. "Mom," Thomas started, his voice quieter now, but still filled with the same sharp edge. This has gone too far. We're not going to let you destroy everything for the sake of this stranger." Emily took a deep breath, preparing herself for the worst. "She's not a stranger, Thomas. She's a person, a good person, and I won't apologize for that." Richard stepped forward, his expression one of barely contained frustration. "You've changed, Mom. We don't even recognize you anymore. You've let this woman, Clara interrupted, her voice steady and cold, has been more of a daughter to Emily than any of you have in the last few years." Claire stepped forward next, her eyes wide with disbelief. "How dare you? You don't get to speak like that. You've done enough damage. This ends now." Emily felt a pang in her chest as the words from her children hit their mark. It wasn't just anger that they were displaying now, but fear. Fear of losing her. They weren't angry with Clara. No, they were angry with her for making a choice they couldn't understand. "Enough," Emily said, her voice sharp, surprising even herself. She had been avoiding confrontation for so long, but now, with everything at stake, her patience had finally worn thin. "I've listened to all of you over and over again. But I am not going to apologize for this, for her. Clara has been here for me when none of you were." Thomas took a step back, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief. "This is about you, Mom. You're letting someone else control your life, and for what? To spite us?" The word stung, but Emily stood firm, her back straight. "I'm not doing this to spite you. I'm doing it because I deserve peace. I deserve to be seen. And if you can't respect that, then maybe you don't know who I am anymore." Clara reached out, placing a gentle hand on Emily's arm, offering silent support. Emily didn't look at her. She didn't need to. Clara's presence spoke louder than any words could. "Mom," Richard said, his voice softer now but full of sadness. "You've always been there for us. But we can't keep pretending everything's okay. This This can't keep going. Emily's heart was torn. She didn't want to lose them, but the truth was clear now. She had already lost them in small, subtle ways over the years. This wasn't about Clara anymore. It was about her own worth, her own life. If they couldn't see that, then maybe they would never understand. "I've made my choice," Emily said, her voice quiet but resolute. "And I won't turn my back on Clara now. Not after everything she's done for me. Not after everything we've been through." Silence hung between them all. Thomas, Richard, and Claire exchanged glances, their faces a mix of anger, disbelief, and something else, something like regret. But no words came. They didn't know what to say. They couldn't argue with the truth of Emily's words. And it left them with nothing to fight back with. Finally, Thomas spoke, his voice cold and final. "Then we're done here, Mom. We won't be back." With that, he turned and walked out, Claire and Richard following behind him. The door slammed shut behind them, and Emily stood there, her heart racing. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts as the weight of the moment settled over her. She had made the choice, the hard, painful choice, but it was done now. Clara's hand still rested on her arm, her touch warm and steady. "You did the right thing," Clara said softly. Emily nodded, her throat tight. "Did I?" she whispered, barely able to hear her own voice over the pounding of her heart. "Yes," Clara said, her voice filled with conviction. "You did, and you don't have to do it alone. Not anymore." As Emily looked at Clara, she realized something. She had feared this moment for so long, the moment when she would have to choose. But now that it was over, now that she had made the decision, a sense of calm settled over her. For the first time in years, she felt free. The storm wasn't over, not by a long shot, but Emily had learned something in these quiet, intense days. No matter what happened next, she would face it with Clara by her side. And that in itself made all the difference. It had been a week since Emily's confrontation with her children. The silence that followed was almost unbearable, each day dragging on like a heavy weight pressing against her chest. It wasn't just the absence of her children's presence that weighed on her. It was the absence of their approval, their love. She hadn't realized until now just how much she had craved their validation. But as Clara had said, that chapter was closed. Emily had chosen a different path, and yet the echoes of the past lingered in every corner of her mind. Clara, too, seemed to sense the shift in the air. Despite her calm and supportive demeanor, Emily could see the small changes in her. The way she no longer moved as freely about the house, the way her eyes would sometimes betray a sadness that didn't belong to her. Emily didn't need to ask. She knew what it was. Clara had become entwined in her life in ways neither of them could have anticipated. And the weight of that, the reality of it, was beginning to settle in. On one quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Emily found Clara standing by the window again. Her posture was slightly hunched, her fingers tracing the glass as if lost in thought. Emily stood for a moment in the doorway watching her, the lump in her throat growing larger with every passing second. Clara turned when she heard Emily approach, offering a soft smile. But even that felt distant, as though it were just a mask over something deeper. "Clara," Emily started, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. I know it hasn't been easy for you either." Clara shook her head gently, her smile faltering. "No need to apologize, Emily. This is my choice too. I knew it wouldn't be simple, but it's hard." She sighed, then added with a shrug, "And I think we both know that things are about to get a lot harder." Emily frowned, the weight of Clara's words settling into her chest like a stone. She could feel it too. It wasn't just about her children anymore. There were larger forces at play. Emily's own doubts about the future, the family's disdain toward Clara. But most of all, it was the unspoken realization that things could never go back to the way they were. Her phone buzzed suddenly, pulling her from her thoughts. Emily glanced at it. It was a message from Thomas. "We need to talk." The message was brief, almost too brief, and it made Emily's stomach turn. For days she had wondered if they might reach out, if they might soften even just a little. But this message felt different. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation, it was a demand. And as she read the words again, her heart skipped a beat. "Clara," Emily whispered, looking up from the phone. "I think they're coming back." Clara's eyes narrowed, her expression turning serious. "Do you think they're ready to talk?" "I don't know," Emily admitted, her fingers gripping the phone tighter. "But I think they're angry. Thomas, he's never been this cold." Clara took a slow breath. "If this is a test, then we have to be prepared. You've made your choice, Emily, and I've made mine. But the rest of the world isn't going to make it easy." Emily swallowed hard, knowing Clara was right. She had made her decision, and it was a decision that would never be easily understood by her family. But it wasn't about them anymore. It was about her, about Clara, and about finally standing up for herself. Later that evening, Thomas arrived at the house, his face tight, his jaw clenched in that all-too-familiar way. Behind him stood Claire, her arms crossed defensively, her expression closed off, and Richard, looking even more out of place than usual. Emily took a deep breath and stood in the living room, her heart hammering. Clara remained by her side, her presence a quiet force of support. Emily didn't know what they were here to say, but she was ready for whatever it was. Thomas didn't waste any time. "This needs to end, Mom," he said bluntly, his voice steady but filled with a hard edge. "We can't keep pretending like this is okay. This relationship with her, it's ruining everything. You've shut us out. You've chosen her over us." Emily's chest tightened at his words. She had feared this moment for so long, feared the day they would make her choose between her family and the person who had been there for her when no one else had. But now that it was here, she felt a strange calmness, a sense of clarity. "I haven't shut you out, Thomas," Emily said softly yet firmly. "I've simply chosen to live my life the way I want, and that includes Clara. She hasn't come here to tear us apart. She came here because she saw me, when no one else did. I've been invisible for too long, and I won't apologize for finally being seen." Thomas's face twisted with frustration. "You think this is about you being seen? This is about you pushing us away, about choosing her over your own flesh and blood." Clara stepped forward, her voice calm but unwavering. "It's not about pushing anyone away. It's about finding a place to belong. Maybe you don't understand that because you've never had to fight for it." Richard shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking between Clara and Emily. "Maybe there's something to what she's saying, Thomas. Maybe we've been too hard on Mom." But Thomas wasn't ready to hear it. His eyes blazed with anger as he turned to Emily. "You've let this woman poison your mind. You've become someone else, someone I don't even recognize anymore." The words stung like a slap, and Emily's heart twisted in pain. But she didn't let the tears fall. She couldn't. Not now. Not when she had finally found a sense of peace in the chaos. "I am still your mother," Emily said, her voice breaking through the tension. "But I am not the woman you want me to be. I can't be that anymore." There was a long, painful silence. Claire and Richard exchanged glances, their faces conflicted. But Thomas stood firm, his expression one of resolve. "Then I guess we're done here." With those words, he turned, walking out of the room. Claire hesitated for a moment before following him, Richard trailing behind, his gaze lingering on Emily with a mixture of pity and sorrow. And just like that, they were gone. The weight of their departure hung heavy in the air, but there was no turning back now. Emily had chosen this path, and though the pain was raw, she knew deep down that she was finally, truly living for herself. Clara stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. "You did well," she said softly. Emily's throat tightened. She didn't know if she could say that herself, but for the first time in a long while, she felt something resembling hope. The days following the confrontation were heavy, filled with an unspoken tension that neither Clara nor Emily could shake off. The house, once filled with the occasional laughter and soft murmurs of family visits, now felt like a cavern of silence. Emily found herself drifting through the rooms, her footsteps echoing in the empty spaces, each room a reminder of what had been lost. The phone, once a lifeline to her children, now sat untouched on the kitchen counter, its silence almost mocking her. It was Clara who noticed the shift first, the subtle change in Emily's demeanor, the way her eyes had begun to lose that spark of hope. The emotional toll of her decision to stand her ground, to defy her children's wishes, was starting to weigh on her. Clara, ever perceptive, knew that the next few days would be crucial. The world outside seemed oblivious to the storm inside their small home. The seasons were changing. Winter was creeping in, bringing with it cold winds and longer nights. Yet Emily felt as though she were stuck in an eternal autumn. Everything faded and withered before it could bloom. One afternoon, as Emily sat at the kitchen table staring out at the leafless trees, Clara approached her cautiously. "Emily, you've been quiet today. Are you all right?" Emily looked up, her eyes tired, but there was a flicker of something deeper behind them. Regret, maybe, or a resignation to the fact that life had chosen a path for her that she hadn't expected. "I'm fine, Clara," Emily replied, her voice hollow. "Just thinking." Clara took a seat across from her, her eyes softening. "You've been thinking about them, haven't you?" Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she gazed at the distant horizon, as if hoping the answer would reveal itself in the way the light changed across the sky. "I don't know, Clara. I thought I was prepared for this. I thought I could be strong. But I wasn't prepared for the silence, the way they just walked away." Clara reached across the table, her hand covering Emily's, a small but comforting gesture. "I know you're hurting, but you're not alone. You have me." Emily's eyes welled with unshed tears, but she held them back, fighting the wave of emotion threatening to overtake her. "I don't know if I can keep going like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm not sure how much more of this isolation I can bear." The moment hung in the air, thick with sorrow and uncertainty. Clara, sensing the depth of Emily's struggle, stood up and moved to the window, her gaze distant but purposeful. "Sometimes," Clara said softly, "the hardest part is accepting that the people we love, they're not always going to be who we need them to be. And sometimes that means finding new people to lean on." Emily turned her head, meeting Clara's gaze. There was an honesty in Clara's words that felt like a balm to her wounded heart. "And you're here for me, aren't you?" Emily asked, her voice thick with gratitude. Clara nodded. "Always." But just as the warmth of their connection began to settle into a comforting rhythm, the doorbell rang, breaking the moment. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the timing couldn't have been worse. She exchanged a glance with Clara, who seemed just as startled by the interruption. Reluctantly, Emily stood up and walked toward the door, her heart racing. Who could it be? Another wave of dread passed through her, but she didn't want to be rude. She opened the door slowly, unsure of what to expect. Standing on the other side was someone Emily hadn't seen in months, a figure she hadn't expected to ever cross her doorstep again. It was Claire, her daughter. And behind her, Thomas and Richard stood, their faces grim and stiff. "I need to talk to you," Claire said, her voice strained. The words hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. She stepped back, motioning them to enter. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her breath caught in her throat. Could this be the moment they finally came to their senses? Or was it just another battle waiting to unfold? They stepped inside, and for a moment no one spoke. The tension was palpable, thick enough to suffocate them all. Claire glanced nervously at Clara, who stood by Emily's side watching the scene unfold. Emily could feel the walls closing in. It was clear that this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. There was a weight in the air, a heaviness that told her this was the moment everything would change. After a long silence, Thomas spoke, his voice cold and distant. "We've been talking, Mom," he began, his eyes flicking briefly to Clara. "And we think we made a mistake." Emily's heart gave a small leap of hope, but the words that followed quickly dashed it. "We want you to come back," Thomas continued, his voice softer now. "We've been wrong. You've been a part of our family for years, and we want you to be with us again." Claire stepped forward, her voice trembling. "We're sorry, Mom, we've been selfish. But we need you. I need you." Emily blinked, her mind reeling. Could it really be this simple? Could they really be apologizing? Could they truly understand the hurt they'd caused? But before she could respond, Clara stepped forward, her voice calm but unwavering. "You don't get to come in here and make demands," she said. Her tone firm but not cruel. "You can't just walk in and expect everything to be all right. Emily has made her choice. And that choice isn't just about you. It's about her happiness, and her right to choose who she wants to be with." Thomas flinched at Clara's words, and for a moment his mask of pride cracked, revealing a flicker of vulnerability. But it quickly disappeared, replaced by frustration. "Is this really how you're going to play this, Mom?" Thomas said, his voice rising again. "You've chosen her over your own family. What about us? What about the years we've spent together?" Emily's chest tightened. She had expected this, but hearing it out loud was a different kind of pain. She wasn't sure if she was more hurt by his words, or the realization that this was what it had all come to. An ultimatum. "Don't do this," Emily said softly, her voice breaking. "I can't choose between you and Clara, I won't. I've lived my whole life trying to make everyone happy, but it's never been enough. And I'm done. I can't keep giving pieces of myself away to make others whole." The room went silent. The weight of Emily's words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. It was clear that the battle was far from over. But Emily had said her piece. Clara gently placed her hand on Emily's shoulder, her touch grounding her. They were in this together now, no matter what came next. The house felt colder that evening. Not because of the winter's chill that had begun to creep through the walls, but because of the tension that lingered long after Claire, Thomas, and Richard left. Emily and Clara sat in the living room, the silence between them thick and suffocating. Neither of them spoke for a long time, both lost in their own thoughts, processing what had just transpired. Emily stared out of the window, her eyes tracing the fading light as the sun dipped below the horizon. The warmth of the conversation earlier had vanished, leaving behind only the cold, harsh reality of the choices before her. It had been years since her children had asked anything of her, years since they'd been the family they once were. But now, they were back, demanding she choose between them and Clara. Clara watched her quietly, sensing the turmoil inside her. She didn't need to speak. She could see the pain in Emily's eyes, the conflict swirling within her. The woman who had always given so much to others, who had lived her life in the shadow of her family's expectations, now faced the impossible task of reconciling her past with her present. "I didn't expect it to be like this," Emily whispered, almost as if to herself. Clara's voice was soft but steady. "You didn't expect them to come back?" Emily shook her head slowly. "No, I didn't. But I didn't expect it to feel so wrong." Their words, everything they said, it sounded so rehearsed, so insincere. Clara took a deep breath and walked over to the couch sitting beside Emily. "Maybe they really do miss you, Emily. Maybe they realize what they've lost. But it's not about them anymore. It's about you. What do you want? What will make you happy?" Emily closed her eyes, the weight of Clara's question settling over her. The truth was, she didn't know anymore. For so many years she had lived for her family, her children, her husband, the house, the responsibilities. Her dreams had been pushed aside, swallowed by the demands of others. But Clara had brought her back to herself, to who she once was before life had dulled her spirit. "I just wanted them to love me," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I wanted to feel like I mattered to them. But I don't think they ever saw me. Not really. They only saw what they needed from me." Clara's hand gently brushed Emily's arm, offering silent comfort. "You do matter, Emily. You matter to me. And you matter to yourself. You're not invisible anymore." The words sank deep into Emily's heart, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to truly believe them. But there was still that nagging fear. Could she really walk away from her children again? Could she stand firm in this new relationship, knowing that it meant severing ties with the family she had devoted her life to? The doorbell rang again, startling both of them. Emily froze, her heart skipping a beat. She wasn't ready for another confrontation. Not yet. But Clara stood up, her face resolute. She wouldn't let Emily face this alone. "Stay here," Clara said, her voice firm. "I'll answer the door." Emily nodded, a mixture of relief and dread flooding her chest. Clara walked to the door with a calmness that Emily envied, and within moments, the door creaked open. Emily could hear muffled voices, the sound of her children speaking with Clara. The exchange seemed polite, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air. A few minutes later, Clara returned, her face unreadable. "They're gone," Clara said softly, sitting back down beside Emily. "They just wanted to know if you've made your decision." Emily's heart sank. It was happening. The moment of truth. The moment where she had to choose between her family, her past, and the life she had built with Clara. "What did you tell them?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Clara looked her in the eye, her gaze steady and sure. "I told them it's not your decision yet. I told them you needed more time. But I also told them that if you choose to stay here, I'll be right beside you." Emily's eyes filled with tears, a flood of emotions she had long suppressed, threatening to escape. Clara had never been anything but loyal to her. She had never once questioned Emily's choices, never once asked for anything in return. And now, when the world outside had turned its back on Emily, Clara was the one person who had remained. "I can't ask you to choose for me," Emily said, her voice breaking. "I have to make this decision myself." Clara smiled, her expression gentle. "You don't have to ask, Emily. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here, and whatever you decide, we'll face it together." For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt a sense of peace. She had lived her life trying to meet others' expectations, but now she was finally starting to understand what it meant to live for herself, to make a choice that wasn't about pleasing others or fulfilling some ideal, but about her own happiness and well-being. I think I know what I need to do," Emily said, her voice filled with a quiet determination. Clara nodded, her heart swelling with pride. She had seen this moment coming, and now it was finally here. Emily had found her strength, and Clara would be there to support her, no matter what. But just as Emily stood up to make her final decision, her phone buzzed. The screen flashed with a new message, another text from Thomas. Her heart raced as she read the words. "Mom, please. We don't understand why you're doing this. We need you. This isn't just about Clara, it's about family. Don't cut us out of your life." Emily's hand trembled as she set the phone down. The pull of her family, the weight of their demands was stronger than ever, but she couldn't let it consume her, not again. The silence stretched between them once more, but this time it was a silence of resolve. "I'll make my choice now," Emily said, her voice unwavering. The future was uncertain, but for the first time Emily felt ready to face it. She wasn't just a mother, a wife, or a daughter anymore. She was herself. And whatever came next, she would walk that path with Clara by her side. The night seemed to stretch on endlessly, the weight of Emily's decision hanging in the air. She had made up her mind, but the decision was not easy. Standing at the crossroads between her past and her future, Emily knew that no matter which path she chose, there would be no turning back. Clara stood beside her, steadfast and silent, offering a comforting presence, but giving Emily the space she needed to come to terms with what was happening. The morning after, Emily sent her children a brief text. "I've made my decision. Let's talk." She didn't know if they would come, but somehow she felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. The act of simply acknowledging what she needed gave her a small taste of freedom. It wasn't long before the doorbell rang. The familiar sound of it sent a shiver down her spine, and for a moment, Emily froze. Clara, however, was already at the door, a calm but determined look on her face. It was as though she had known this moment would come, that Emily would need her strength now more than ever. The door creaked open to reveal Thomas and Richard, standing side by side, their expressions a mixture of frustration and pleading. Their presence in the doorway felt like an unspoken challenge, and yet there was something deeply fragile about the way they stood, as if they too had become aware of the gravity of what was about to unfold. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Come in," she said quietly. "We need to talk." They stepped inside, exchanging an uncomfortable glance before sitting down in the living room. The atmosphere between them was tense, filled with unspoken accusations. But Emily wasn't afraid anymore. She'd been afraid for too long, afraid of disappointing them, afraid of being alone, afraid of choosing herself. But not anymore. "What's this about, Mom?" Thomas asked, his voice strained. "We've been trying to reach you. We just don't understand why you've pulled away like this." Why, Clara?" Richard nodded, his gaze intense. "You've always been there for us. And now, suddenly you're—" "What? Choosing her over your own children? What happened to the family we used to be?" Emily's heart broke at their words. She had spent so many years trying to fulfill their expectations, trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife. And now, when she had finally found something that felt real, something that made her feel alive again, they didn't understand. They couldn't. "I'm not choosing Clara over you," Emily began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm choosing me. I'm choosing a life where I'm not just living for others, where I'm not just giving and giving until there's nothing left. I've given everything to you both, but somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was. And Clara has helped me find that again." Thomas's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing with frustration. "You think she's helping you? You think she's good for you? She's a—" He paused, glancing at Clara before finishing. "A stranger? You've known her for what? A few months?" Emily felt her chest tighten, her anger rising. "You don't get it, do you?" she asked, her voice rising. "You don't understand what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like you're only valuable for what you can give. I've spent my life putting everyone else first, but Clara sees me, and that's not something I'm willing to lose." Richard sighed, his face softening. "We didn't mean to make you feel like you don't matter, Mom," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But we're your family. We just want to know where we stand." Clara, who had remained silent up until this point, stood up and walked over to Emily. Without a word, she placed her hand gently on Emily's shoulder, offering her quiet support. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, an unspoken declaration that they were in this together, that no matter how difficult things got, they would face it side by side. Emily looked up at her children, her heart aching for them, but she knew what she had to do. This was her life now. She could no longer allow them to define her worth. "I'm not asking for your approval," Emily said softly. "I'm asking for your understanding. I need to live the life that makes me feel whole, and Clara is a part of that. If you can't accept that, then I'm afraid we have nothing left to talk about." The room fell into an awkward silence. Emily could see the conflict in their eyes, anxiety, confusion, anger, and yet something else too. Perhaps they were starting to realize that the foundation of their family had been built on expectations, not love. Perhaps deep down, they understood that Emily's choice wasn't just about Clara, but about her own freedom. Finally, Thomas broke the silence. His voice was quieter now, tinged with something like resignation. "We just don't want to lose you, Mom. We don't want to be left behind." Emily stood up, her hand gently taking Clara's. "I'm not leaving you behind. I'm just finding my way back to myself." Clara smiled softly, her heart swelling with pride. This was Emily's moment, and Clara would never allow anyone to take that from her. Not now, not ever. Richard cleared his throat, breaking the momentary stillness. "We'll respect your decision," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we hope you'll reconsider. Family is supposed to come first." Emily shook her head. "Family does come first, but not in the way you think. It's about real connection, and right now I need to rebuild what's real for me." Thomas and Richard exchanged a glance, and for the first time, Emily saw something shift in their eyes. Maybe they didn't agree with her decision. Maybe they never would. But she could feel the beginning of a change in the air, an understanding that the world wasn't as simple as they had once believed. "We'll give you space," Thomas said, standing up, "but we'll be back. Don't shut us out completely." Emily nodded, her throat tight with unshed tears. "I won't shut you out. I just need to find my own way." As they left, Clara remained by Emily's side, her hand still on her shoulder. The house was quiet once more, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. A quiet full of possibility, of hope, of a future that was entirely in Emily's hands. The silence that followed Thomas and Richard's departure was deafening. The echoes of their words lingered in Emily's mind, but this time they didn't feel like sharp thorns. They were more like the sound of distant thunder, an unavoidable reminder of the storms of the past, but one that couldn't reach her anymore. Emily stood still in the middle of her living room, the weight of the moment heavy on her shoulders but not crushing. Clara's presence beside her grounded her like nothing else could. Clara was quiet for a moment, watching Emily with a deep understanding that only came from shared experience. "You did well," Clara said softly, her voice warm. "You were strong. You stood up for yourself." Emily let out a slow breath, sinking into the sofa. Her hands were trembling slightly, a mix of exhaustion and relief. "It didn't feel like strength at the time," she admitted. "It felt like I was losing them." "You weren't losing them," Clara replied, sitting beside her, her voice firm but gentle. "You were just claiming what was always yours. They'll come around. They have to." But Emily wasn't so sure. She couldn't shake the fear that this might be the final nail in the coffin. Their relationship had been strained for years, but this felt different. This was her choosing someone else over them, and that was something they might never forgive. But Emily couldn't live in that fear any longer. She had spent too many years bending to the will of others, suppressing her own desires, her own needs, just to maintain the illusion of peace. It had nearly broken her. For the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of something that she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Clara leaned forward, gently placing her hand on Emily's. "Whatever happens, you're not alone in this." Emily's eyes welled up with emotion. For so long she had been afraid of being alone, and now Clara had become the one person who made her feel truly seen, truly understood. This wasn't just a fleeting connection. This was something deep, something that could withstand anything the world threw at them. But the truth was, Emily was still afraid. Fear was a constant companion, but now it wasn't about surviving. It was about thriving, even in the face of uncertainty. She couldn't lose herself again, not for her children, not for anyone. The next day, Emily's resolve was tested. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. It was short, almost curt. "We need to talk. Can you meet us tomorrow at the house?" Emily's stomach tightened. She had hoped for space, for a little time to let the dust settle, but it seemed they weren't done yet. Clara, sensing her unease, looked at her and said, "You don't have to go. We don't need to go back to their world." Emily hesitated, the pull of family strong despite everything. "I don't want to seem like I'm abandoning them. I know they don't understand. Despite everything. I don't want to seem like I'm abandoning them. I know they don't understand. But they're my children, Clara." "I know," Clara said softly. "But this is your choice. This is your life. You don't owe them an explanation anymore." Emily looked down at the message again. Richard's words were heavy with a sense of urgency, but Emily was tired of being dictated to. She needed to do this on her own terms. "I'll go," she said finally. "But I'll go on my own. And I'll be the one to decide when enough is enough." Clara smiled, a gentle but proud expression. I'll be here, whatever happens. The following afternoon, Emily found herself standing in front of her children's house, her heart racing in her chest. It felt like an eternity had passed since the last time she stepped through this door. So many things had changed. And yet the house still felt the same. It was as though time had stood still, trapping her in a world where she had no voice. Richard opened the door before she could knock, his face tight with concern. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. Thomas stood behind him, his arms crossed and a frown on his face. The tension between them was palpable. Emily stepped inside, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I'm here. What is it that you need to say?" Thomas was the first to speak, his voice tinged with frustration. "Mom, this isn't about Clara. It's about you. You've changed. You're not the woman you used to be. And we don't know how to fix it." "I'm not the woman I used to be," Emily said, her voice firm but sad. "You're right. I've changed, but I'm not broken, and I'm not lost. I'm finding myself, and it's not about Clara. It's about me." Richard's face softened for a moment. "But what about us? What about everything we've been through? We can't just pretend like none of it matters." Emily's heart wrenched. She wasn't pretending. Everything they had been through mattered, but she couldn't keep sacrificing herself just to hold on to something that had already slipped through her fingers. "I'm not pretending," Emily replied, her voice trembling. "I'm not giving up on you, but I can't keep living for you. I need to live for myself." Thomas stepped forward, his expression still hard but his voice quieter now. "We don't understand this, Mom. We just don't. But if you think it's the right choice for you," Richard nodded slowly. His face conflicted. "We want you to be happy, Mom. Just don't shut us out completely." Emily swallowed hard, the weight of their words sinking in. For the first time, she felt like they were finally starting to see her. Really see her. "I won't shut you out," she said softly, "but I need you to understand that I'm not the same person I was. And I need your support, even if you don't agree with everything I'm doing." For a long moment there was silence. Emily could see the uncertainty in their eyes, but there was something else too. Something that told her this conversation, though painful, had opened a door. It wasn't fully open yet, but it was cracked. Finally, Richard spoke. "We'll try, Mom, we will." Emily nodded, feeling a bittersweet sense of relief. This wasn't the resolution she had hoped for, but it was a beginning. It was a start. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. Emily had left the meeting with her children feeling a strange mixture of hope and doubt. It was a rare, tentative peace, like a fragile bridge that could either crumble under pressure or stand strong against the winds of change. She spent her nights with Clara, finding solace in their shared silence. But even Clara's comforting presence couldn't ease the lingering questions that gnawed at her. Emily had been hopeful after their last conversation, but as the days wore on, she began to sense that the reconciliation she longed for might not come as easily as she had hoped. The distance between her and her children still felt vast, like an unbridgeable chasm that no words could fill. The house, once a place of warmth and familiarity, now seemed colder, more distant. On a particularly quiet morning, as Emily sat with a cup of tea in the sunroom, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name that flashed across the screen was Richard's. She hesitated for only a moment before answering. "Mom," Richard's voice came through, strained but steady. "We need to talk. It's about Clara." The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Emily's stomach tightened. "What about Clara?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. "Look, I don't know how to say this, but we've been thinking about everything. And we don't feel comfortable with her being so close to you. It's not just about her. It's about everything. About the changes you've made since she came into your life. We're just worried." Emily's heart sank, the old familiar ache creeping back into her chest. "I understand that you're worried, Richard," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But Clara is a part of my life now. She's been there for me in ways that you and Thomas haven't. She's the one who's been helping me see the person I lost so long ago. I don't think you understand, Mom. Richard's voice was sharper now. This isn't just about her. It's about you, what you're doing to yourself. You've changed, and we don't know how to help you if you won't even see what's happening. Emily felt her throat tighten. She had expected this, but hearing it out loud still stung more than she could have imagined. I haven't changed for the worse, she said, a bitter edge creeping into her words. I've changed because I'm finally choosing myself, after everything I've done for you both. I'm done being invisible. Clara sees me. She doesn't need me to be something I'm not. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Richard's voice was softer when he spoke again. I don't want to lose you, Mom, but this is hard to accept. Emily closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek, though she had no idea when it had started. She wiped it away quickly, trying to regain her composure. I don't want to lose you either, but I need to live for me now. I can't keep living in a world where I'm second to everyone else's expectations. I'm still your mother, Richard. I'm still the person who loved you both with everything I had. But I need more than just that. I need my life back. Then maybe we need some time, Richard said, the words carrying an unmistakable finality. I'm not saying we'll never understand, but maybe we need space to think about it. Emily hung up the phone. The silence that followed felt heavier than it had ever been before. Space. It was the same thing she had wanted for herself all those years, but now it felt like an abyss. The loneliness, the distance, it all threatened to swallow her up. Clara, sensing her distress, appeared at her side a moment later, her expression soft but knowing. What happened? She asked gently, sitting down next to Emily. They don't understand, Emily whispered, her voice raw. They want space. They don't get it. They think I'm losing myself, but I'm not. I'm finding myself. Clara reached out, taking her hand in hers. You're not alone in this, Emily. You're not losing yourself. You're just becoming who you've always been meant to be, and that's something no one can take from you. But Emily wasn't sure if she believed that yet. As much as she longed for her children to see her as the woman she had become, she feared the distance between them might be unbridgeable. And what would that mean for her relationship with Clara? Was she really willing to sacrifice everything for the chance at a new life? She could feel the weight of that decision pressing on her chest. That evening, Emily went to bed with the words Richard had said echoing in her mind. We need space to think about it. It was a phrase that both gave her hope and deepened her uncertainty. Space. She wondered how much space they needed. Would it be days, weeks, months? Would they ever truly understand? Clara was right. Emily wasn't alone. But was that enough? The next few days passed in a blur. Emily spent most of her time with Clara, walking through the park, sitting in cafes, enjoying the rare moments of peace she had fought so hard to achieve. But as time wore on, she began to feel the strain. The weight of her children's absence, of their rejection, loomed over her, even as she tried to focus on the life she was building with Clara. Then, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, there was a knock on the door. Emily opened it, her heart leaping into her throat at the sight of Thomas standing on her doorstep. His face was unreadable, his eyes a mixture of guilt and something else she couldn't quite place. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Can we talk?" The room felt impossibly still, as if even the air itself was holding its breath. Emily stood there, frozen at the doorway, her heart thumping so loudly in her chest that she could hear nothing else. There was Thomas, her son, the child she had raised with love and care, the one who had once depended on her for everything, standing before her now. A grown man, uncertain and vulnerable. It had been months since she last saw him in person, but in that time the silence between them had felt like an eternity. Emily could see the strain in his face, the exhaustion in his eyes, the heaviness in his posture. She swallowed hard, pushing the tightness in her throat down as she stepped aside, allowing him into the house. The familiar scent of the old wood and dust hit him immediately, and for a moment, it was as if he had walked into a world he no longer recognized. "Come in, Thomas," Emily said softly, her voice barely a whisper. She gestured toward the living room. "Would you like some tea?" Thomas nodded silently, following her into the room. He sank into the armchair by the window, staring out at the overgrown garden outside, as if it held the answers to everything they both needed. Emily busied herself in the kitchen, the act of preparing the tea allowing her to center herself, but her mind raced with questions. Why now? Why, after all this time? She returned a few minutes later, placing the steaming cups on the coffee table. She sat down across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The silence stretched between them, both of them unwilling to break it first. Finally, it was Thomas who spoke. "I don't know where to start," he admitted, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't even know if I can say what I came here to say." Emily nodded, her heart aching for the son she had once known so well. "It's okay, Thomas. We have time. I've been thinking," he began, his voice hesitant. "About everything. About you. About Clara." Emily's breath hitched slightly at the mention of Clara's name. She knew what was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud still caused a sharp sting in her chest. "I never understood it, Mom," Thomas continued, his gaze still fixed on the window, avoiding her eyes. "I didn't understand why you wanted her around. She's not like us. She's not our family." The words hung heavy in the air, and Emily felt her chest tighten. She opened her mouth to speak, but her throat closed up. Instead, she waited, listening, forcing herself to hear him out. "I didn't get it," he said again, shaking his head as though trying to clear his thoughts. "I thought you were just being naive, and I was angry. I was angry that you'd chosen her over us. It felt like we weren't good enough for you anymore, that you didn't need us, and that hurt." Thomas's voice cracked on the last word, and Emily could see the deep pain he was carrying. It wasn't anger anymore. It was regret, and it was real. "I didn't choose Clara over you, Thomas," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She leaned forward, searching his face for the boy she once knew, the one who used to sit in her lap and ask for stories before bed. "I chose myself." Thomas's eyes met hers for the first time, and there was a flicker of understanding, something she had been waiting for. "I don't know how to explain it," she continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "But for so long, I didn't even know who I was. I was just Mom, just your mother. And after you both grew up and left, I realized I didn't have anything left for me. And then Clara came into my life, and she saw me. She didn't need me to be perfect. She didn't expect anything from me except to be myself. She made me feel alive again, Thomas. I hadn't felt that way in years." Thomas's eyes softened, though there was still a hint of uncertainty there. He opened his mouth to speak, but Emily continued, needing him to understand more than ever before. "I love you," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I always have, and nothing will change that. But I've spent my whole life being everything for everyone else. And now I need to be something for me." Thomas stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words, trying to understand a side of his mother he hadn't fully seen before. The tension between them was thick, but in the rawness of this moment, something shifted. Slowly he nodded, though it was clear he wasn't entirely ready to embrace this new version of her. "I don't know if I can fully understand," he said quietly. "But I want to try. I don't want to lose you, Mom. But I'm scared that you'll keep pushing us away for her. That one day, you'll choose her over us completely." Emily felt a sharp pang at the thought. It was a fear she had carried herself, though she had never voiced it aloud. "I won't choose anyone over you, Thomas. Not ever. But I need you to accept that Clara is a part of my life now. She's helped me more than I could ever explain, and I need you to see that. She's not a replacement for you. She's someone who's been here for me in a way no one else has been able to." Thomas sat back in the chair, his brow furrowed as he processed her words. "I don't know if I can, Mom, but I'm willing to try. I don't want to lose you. I just need time to figure it out." Emily reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it over his. "I can give you time, Thomas, but I need you to promise me something." "What?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Promise me that you'll try to understand, that you'll give Clara a chance. She's not trying to replace you. She's just trying to help me find myself again." "I promise," Thomas said, his voice almost a whisper. He looked at her, his expression uncertain but sincere. The tension in the room finally began to ease. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt a flicker of hope. It was fragile, but it was there. A crack in the wall that had separated them for so long. And with that, she realized something she had forgotten. She was not alone in this. She had her children, even if they were still struggling to understand. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start rebuilding. The early evening sun bathed the house in golden light, casting long shadows across the creaking wooden floors. Emily sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the day settling heavily on her shoulders. The conversation with Thomas had been a step forward. But it was clear that healing wasn't as simple as words. Time had woven deep rifts between them, and though there was a glimmer of hope, Emily knew it would take more than a few promises to mend the broken threads of their relationship. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. It was a sound that carried a sense of urgency, one that had not come from Thomas. Her heart raced, her hands momentarily freezing on the cup of tea she had been holding. Who could it be? She walked slowly toward the door, her mind still preoccupied with her son's words. When she opened it, she was met with a sight she hadn't expected. Clara stood there, her usual hopeful expression replaced by something darker. She wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man Emily didn't recognize, but whose face bore an unmistakable look of disdain. "Clara?" Emily asked, her voice soft, though she could feel her pulse quicken. "What's going on?" Clara stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her gaze flicking nervously toward the stranger. The man's presence filled the room like a cloud of tension, making the air feel thick and heavy. Clara glanced at Emily, then at the man, clearly struggling to find the right words. I need to talk to you," Clara said, her voice trembling. It's important. And, this is Jacob, my brother." Emily blinked, taken aback. Clara had never mentioned a brother before. She had always painted herself as someone without ties to the past, someone who had found her own path, alone in the world. Emily had no idea what to make of this sudden revelation. "Jacob, this is Emily," Clara said, her tone tight, as if unsure of how to navigate the situation. "She's the one I've been helping." Jacob's gaze moved over Emily with a coldness that made her feel exposed. He gave her a curt nod but said nothing. Emily felt a chill run down her spine as she took in the unspoken tension between them. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "Clara, what's going on?" Emily asked again, this time more firmly, her curiosity and concern mounting. "Why did you bring him here?" Clara looked at Jacob, and for the first time, Emily saw her friend's usual warm expression flicker with uncertainty. Clara hesitated, and then the words she had been holding back spilled out in a rush. "I didn't want to tell you this, Emily, but I have no choice now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jacob has been trying to get control of my inheritance, the one my parents left me, and he's threatening to expose everything unless I help him." Emily's eyes widened, the room suddenly feeling much smaller. "What do you mean? What inheritance?" Jacob spoke then, his voice sharp and condescending. "She's not telling you everything. Clara's been hiding things from you, things that, if the right people knew, could ruin her life. And mine." Emily's mind spun as she tried to process what was happening. Clara's past, whatever it was now coming to light, and it was clear that Jacob was not someone she could trust. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Emily asked, her voice quiet but filled with hurt. "Why keep this from me?" Clara's face crumpled with guilt. "I didn't want you to think I was using you. I thought if I told you everything, you'd look at me differently. I didn't want you to think I was a burden. I just wanted to help you. And now Jacob is threatening to tear everything apart. Jacob crossed his arms over his chest, his expression unreadable. You've been living in a dream world. Clara, the sooner you face the reality, the better. Emily's mind raced, trying to put together the pieces of this unexpected puzzle. Clara had never mentioned a family before. She had always said she was alone, struggling to make ends meet. Now it seemed there was more to the story than Emily had ever imagined. Clara, why didn't you trust me with this? Emily asked softly, her voice carrying a mix of concern and disappointment. Why didn't you tell me about this sooner? I didn't want to put you in danger, Clara replied, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't want you to be dragged into the mess that is my past. But now I have no choice. Jacob's cold gaze never wavered. And you should have known better than to get involved with people like her. You're just a pawn in this game, Clara. And if you don't do what I say, everything will fall apart. Emily felt a surge of protectiveness rise in her chest. This man, Jacob, was manipulating Clara. He was using her vulnerability against her, just as Thomas had feared. It was clear that the bond between Clara and Emily was now being tested in ways neither of them had anticipated. Before Emily could respond, Jacob took a step forward, his voice low and threatening. Stay out of this, Emily. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Something inside Emily snapped. She had put her trust in Clara, and now this man was trying to tear that trust apart. Clara was not a pawn. She was a person who had saved Emily from her own isolation, and she wouldn't let anyone take that away from her. I'm not afraid of you, Emily said, her voice steady and firm. You've hurt her enough already. If you think you can control her, you're wrong. Jacob's face twisted in a sneer. We'll see about that, won't we? He turned toward Clara, his hand on her arm in a tight grip. Let's go, Clara. This conversation is over. But Clara didn't move. She stood there, looking torn between the family she had never wanted and the woman who had taken her in. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice a whisper, but it was a declaration. I'm not going with you, Jacob. I'm staying here. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment neither Jacob nor Emily knew how to react. But then Jacob's face darkened, and with one last glare at Emily, he turned and stormed out of the house. As the door slammed behind him, Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She looked at Clara, who was trembling slightly but standing tall. It's not over, Emily, Clara said, her voice quiet but resolute. But I'm not running anymore. Emily reached out, pulling Clara into a tight embrace. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Clara was no longer alone, and neither was she. The days following Jacob's visit were heavy with unspoken tension. Clara had chosen to stay with Emily, but her eyes remained distant, haunted by the promise of her brother's return. Emily could see the weight of it all in her posture, the way her shoulders seemed perpetually stiff, as though she were bracing for an unseen blow. The house, once a place of quiet solace, now felt like a battleground. Every creak of the floorboards and every gust of wind outside seemed to carry a threat. Emily's thoughts often drifted back to Jacob's warning. His words echoed in her mind, replaying over and over. She knew he wasn't the type to bluff, the kind of man who made demands with a cold, calculated gaze didn't back down easily. And now the stakes were higher than ever. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a soft amber glow, Emily sat across from Clara at the kitchen table. The silence between them had become a companion of sorts, as neither of them knew what to say or where to go next. It was as though they were waiting for something to happen, but neither was sure what that something was. Clara broke the silence first. Her voice was quieter than usual, laced with uncertainty. Emily, I'm sorry. I never meant for you to get caught in the middle of all this. You've done so much for me already. Emily shook her head, setting her cup down with a soft clink. Clara, don't apologize. You're not the problem here. It's Jacob, and we'll deal with him together. But Clara wasn't convinced. She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly together as she spoke. I don't think it's that simple. Jacob, He's been looking for something. Something he thinks he deserves. And he'll do anything to get it. I just don't want to see you hurt, Emily. Emily placed a reassuring hand on Clara's, her grip firm. You're not alone in this. I've faced hard things in my life too, Clara. And I'm not going anywhere. But even as she said the words, doubt flickered in her heart. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something far more dangerous than either of them realized, and she couldn't help but wonder if she was truly ready to face the storm that was surely coming. The phone rang, breaking the fragile peace in the room. Emily jumped slightly, and Clara's expression tightened in response to the sound. It was clear that both of them feared what news might come next. Emily reached for the phone, her fingers brushing against it hesitantly before she lifted it to her ear. "Hello?" she said, her voice steady but guarded. "Emily," the voice on the other end said, sending a chill down her spine. "It's Thomas." Her heart gave a sharp lurch at the sound of her son's voice. It had been days since they last spoke, and his sudden call felt like an omen. "Thomas, where are you?" she asked, trying to keep the surprise out of her voice. "Is everything okay?" There was a long pause before Thomas finally spoke again. "I need to talk to you. It's important. Can you meet me tomorrow?" Emily's stomach tightened. "Of course, where?" "Let's just say, I think we need to discuss Clara." The line went dead before Emily could respond. She stared at the phone in her hand, a sense of dread filling her chest. The tone in Thomas's voice had been sharp, almost accusing, and the mention of Clara, that wasn't a coincidence. Thomas had never liked Clara. He hadn't even wanted to acknowledge her presence in their lives. But now it seemed there was more to the story. Something was shifting, and Emily didn't know if she was ready for it. "Who was it?" Clara asked softly, her eyes searching Emily's face. Emily lowered the phone slowly, her mind spinning. "It was Thomas. He wants to meet tomorrow. He said we need to talk about you." Clara's face paled. "I knew it. I knew he'd come for me eventually." Emily placed her hands on the table, leaning forward. "Clara, listen to me. I don't care what happens tomorrow. We'll face it together. You're not alone in this." Clara nodded, but Emily could see the fear in her eyes. There was more at play here than either of them could fully understand, and tomorrow would bring the next piece of the puzzle, whether they were ready or not. The following day, Emily found herself pacing nervously in the living room, waiting for Thomas to arrive. It wasn't just that she was worried about the confrontation that was sure to come. It was the thought that she might lose her son, her only remaining connection to a past she was desperately trying to move on from. When the doorbell finally rang, Emily's heart leaped in her chest. She opened the door to find Thomas standing there, his expression grim. Without a word, he stepped inside, the tension between them palpable. "Thomas," Emily said, her voice faltering slightly. "What's going on? Why the sudden urgency?" Thomas took a deep breath, his jaw clenched. "I'm not going to beat around the bush. Mom, I know what's going on with Clara, and I don't like it. I don't trust her, and I don't think you should either." Emily felt a flash of anger rise in her chest, but she kept her voice even. "She's not the problem, Thomas. You are, you and your stubbornness. Clara has done nothing but help me. She's been there for me in ways I never thought possible." Thomas's face darkened. "You don't understand, Mom. She's using you. She's not the innocent person you think she is. I've been looking into her, and there's a lot you don't know." The words stung, but Emily refused to back down. "I don't need you to protect me. Thomas, I can see who Clara really is. You just don't want to accept that." Thomas's expression faltered, and for a brief moment, Emily saw a flicker of the son she once knew, the son who used to trust her completely before life had driven a wedge between them. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by something colder. "Mom, you have no idea what you're dealing with," Thomas said, his voice low and urgent. "You need to listen to me, or you'll regret it." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. The words that Thomas had spoken were still ringing in her ears, and she couldn't ignore the fear that was now rising in her throat. Was Clara truly hiding something from her? Could Thomas be right? But before she could respond, The door slammed open behind them, and a voice, sharp and cold, cut through the room. "I think it's too late for that, don't you, Emily?" The air in the room shifted as the door slammed open. Emily and Thomas both turned, their gazes locking onto the figure standing in the threshold. The sunlight behind her created a shadow that obscured her face, but the voice was unmistakable, cold, authoritative, and filled with an unsettling familiarity. It was Jacob. He stood there, tall and imposing, his expression as hard as stone. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The man she'd hoped would never return, the man who had once cast such a dark shadow over her life, was now standing in her doorway. Clara, who had been watching the exchange in silence, stood frozen, her face paling as though she had seen a ghost. "Jacob?" Emily's voice trembled, despite her best efforts to remain calm. "What are you doing here?" Jacob took a step forward, his eyes scanning the room with a predatory sharpness. "I think you know why I'm here, Emily. I'm here to finish what I started." Thomas stepped forward, his body tense with hostility. "You're not welcome here." "Jacob, you need to leave. Now." Jacob's gaze flicked to Thomas for a split second, the intensity of his stare enough to silence him. Then, turning back to Emily, he spoke again, his voice low but menacing. "This has nothing to do with you, Thomas. This is between me and Emily. It always has been." Emily's stomach churned. She had never wanted to deal with Jacob again, but here he was, making threats with every word he spoke. She could feel Clara's presence behind her, the weight of her uncertainty almost palpable. "Why now, Jacob?" Emily finally found her voice, trying to keep the anger in check. "Why after all these years?" Jacob's lips curled into a thin smile. "Because I've been patient, Emily. Too patient. But I see now that it's time for things to change. Clara's presence here," he paused, his eyes shifting to Clara, "is a threat to my interests. You don't understand it, but I do." Clara stiffened, her eyes flashing with confusion and fear. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jacob's gaze locked onto her with a chilling intensity. "You think you're innocent in all of this? That you're just helping her out of the goodness of your heart?" He let out a short, bitter laugh. "You're just a pawn, Clara. A tool to get what I want." Clara recoiled slightly, but Emily stepped forward, her voice firm and resolute. "No, you don't get to come into my house and threaten us. Whatever your plans are, Jacob, they end now. You won't hurt her. You won't hurt any of us." Jacob's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "You're not listening, Emily. I'm not here for negotiations. I'm here to take what's mine, and you're either with me or against me." The tension in the room was unbearable. Thomas's fists were clenched, his eyes burning with anger, but he stayed silent for a moment, letting Emily take the lead. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. She wouldn't let Jacob control her any longer. She'd been through too much. "What do you want, Jacob?" Emily demanded, her voice a mixture of defiance and fear. "Why are you doing this?" Jacob's eyes flicked to Clara one last time before settling back on Emily. "I want what's owed to me, and I'll make sure you realize that, one way or another. You think this is over, but it's just begun." With that, he turned on his heel and strode toward the door, leaving the room as abruptly as he had entered. Emily was left standing there, her heart racing, her mind reeling with the implications of what had just transpired. Thomas exhaled sharply, his eyes locked on the door Jacob had just exited. "I knew he was trouble," he muttered, shaking his head. "He's dangerous, Mom. I'm not sure what he's after, but I can promise you this. He won't stop until he gets it." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Jacob's presence had never been a mere inconvenience. It had always been a storm waiting to happen. And now she realized the storm was upon them. Clara, still standing near the kitchen counter, seemed frozen. Her eyes were wide, her lips trembling slightly as if she were struggling to process everything she had just heard. Emily turned to her voice softening as she walked toward her. "Clara," she began, her heart aching for the girl who had become her unexpected anchor. "Are you okay?" Clara didn't respond immediately. She just stared at the door, her mind clearly miles away. But finally she whispered, "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't want to drag you into it. I'm so sorry." Emily. Emily reached out and took Clara's hands in hers, squeezing gently. "Don't apologize. You've done nothing wrong. We'll figure this out. Together." But despite the comfort she tried to offer, Emily knew the truth. Things were only getting more dangerous. Jacob wasn't going to let go of whatever he thought he deserved. And neither she nor Clara could predict what he would do next. A deep, unsettling silence filled the room as Emily tried to make sense of what had just happened. She knew one thing for certain: Jacob would stop at nothing. And that meant they had to prepare for whatever he would throw at them. As the evening wore on, Emily found herself staring out the window, lost in thought. The world outside seemed eerily still, the darkness creeping in, just like the uncertainty that loomed over her future. Tomorrow, she would need to face more than just Jacob's threats. She would have to confront the consequences of her choices, of the new life she had begun to build with Clara, and deep down she feared it might all be coming apart. But for now, there was nothing to do but wait. The morning arrived with a heaviness that settled over the house, as though the air itself was bracing for what was to come. Emily stood by the window, staring out into the quiet streets that had always felt so safe. Now they seemed like a distant memory, like the calm before a storm she could no longer ignore. Thomas had left early, claiming he needed to take care of some business, but Emily knew he was also preparing himself for whatever Jacob might do next. He wasn't one to sit back and wait, and she feared he might be making plans to confront Jacob head-on. It was a dangerous move, but Thomas had always been protective of her, even when she hadn't asked him to be. Clara, on the other hand, had disappeared into her room as soon as Emily had asked if she was okay. Emily hadn't seen her since. The girl had been quiet all morning, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Clara was hiding something important. She had been so wrapped up in Jacob's return that she had barely stopped to ask Clara how she was holding up. The girl had been through so much already. The last thing Emily wanted was to drag her into another mess, but Jacob's presence seemed to change everything. Emily walked slowly toward the kitchen, her thoughts swirling as she reached for the coffee pot. As the hot liquid filled her cup, her mind replayed the events of yesterday, the way Jacob had barged in, the way his words had cut through her like a blade, and the way Clara had looked, standing there so vulnerable in the face of someone like Jacob. Emily set the coffee cup down on the counter, her hands shaking slightly. She couldn't let Clara face this alone. Not again. A soft knock at the door broke through her thoughts. She hesitated for a moment, then moved toward the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. As she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Clara stood there, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red from lack of sleep. She looked so much smaller than usual, as though the weight of the world had pressed down on her fragile shoulders. Clara's voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to you." Emily stepped aside, allowing Clara to enter. The girl walked in slowly, her steps hesitant, and Emily could see the fear in her eyes. She knew this wasn't just about Jacob anymore. Clara took a deep breath, gathering her courage, and finally spoke. "I didn't tell you everything about my past," she said, her voice cracking. "There's something I didn't want you to know." Emily felt her heart tighten. "Clara, whatever it is, you can tell me. You're safe here." Clara shook her head. "It's not that simple. It's not just about me. It's about what Jacob wants. And it's about the reason he's come back. I think I know why he's after you." Emily's mind raced. "What do you mean? How do you know?" Clara closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Before I came here, before I found you, I was—" She trailed off as if the words themselves were too painful to say. Emily waited patiently, her heart aching for the girl. "I was part of a group," Clara continued, her voice trembling now. "A group that Jacob was connected to. He's not just a businessman, Emily. He's part of something much darker." The words hung in the air, and Emily felt a chill creep down her spine. She had always known Jacob was dangerous, but this was something else entirely. Do you mean? Emily couldn't even bring herself to say it. The idea of Jacob being involved in something criminal was too much to bear. Clara nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. Yes, he's been involved in illegal activities for years. He's been using people to get what he wants. People like me. People who had nowhere else to turn. Emily took a step back, her mind spinning. And you think he's trying to use me again? To get to whatever he wants? Clara bit her lip, her voice barely audible. Yes, but there's more. Jacob is not just after money or power. He's after something personal. A knot formed in Emily's stomach. What could he want from me, Clara? What could I possibly have that he needs? Clara swallowed hard, her hands trembling. I think it's you. He wants you. Or rather, he wants something from you that you don't even know you have. The words made Emily's blood run cold. What do you mean? What could I possibly have that he wants? Clara's eyes locked onto hers, her voice low and serious. I think you're more important than you realize, Emily. Jacob doesn't just want to control you. He wants to use you to gain access to something that only you can give him. Emily was silent for a long moment, trying to process the weight of Clara's words. Jacob was after her. He wanted something from her, something she didn't understand yet. But what? And why had he waited so long to come after her? Before Emily could voice her next question, Clara turned away, her eyes filled with an unspoken sadness. I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't mean for you to be dragged into this. I didn't want to put you in danger. Emily reached out, grabbing Clara's arm gently. You didn't. You didn't drag me into anything. I made my choice. We're in this together. Clara looked at her, her eyes wide with gratitude and fear. But Emily, I don't know if we can get out of this. I don't know if we can stop him. Emily's heart sank. She didn't have an answer, and for the first time in years, she felt truly helpless. Jacob was a force of nature, and Clara was right. He would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. But Emily wasn't going to let him take everything from her. Not again. We'll figure it out, Emily said, her voice shaking but filled with determination. We'll find a way to stop him. Together. Clara nodded, her face a mixture of hope and dread. But time is running out, Emily. He's already making his move. Emily looked out the window again, her heart heavy. The storm was coming. She could feel it in her bones, and this time, it wouldn't be just a passing squall. It was going to change everything. The days that followed were filled with a palpable sense of dread. Emily had never felt so on edge in her life. Clara's revelation about Jacob's true intentions gnawed at her, and despite all her efforts to prepare herself, she knew they were running out of time. The pieces of the puzzle were still scattered, and she couldn't make sense of the larger picture. But she had no choice but to keep going, to face the storm head-on. Thomas had grown increasingly tense. He had started to make calls, talking in hushed tones whenever Emily was around. She knew he was trying to reach out to anyone who could help, but with each passing day, the walls around them seemed to close in tighter. Jacob's influence was growing, and it was clear that he wasn't going to leave without getting what he wanted. That afternoon, Emily found herself standing in the foyer, the weight of her decision bearing down on her. She had asked Thomas to meet her there, hoping to find some semblance of a plan, some sense of direction. But when he arrived, he didn't bring any comforting words. Instead, he looked worn, his face etched with worry. We need to talk, he said, his voice low. Emily nodded, leading him into the living room. Clara had gone out for a walk, giving them a moment of privacy. The silence between them was heavy, both of them knowing that the conversation they were about to have could change everything. Is there any word from the lawyer? Emily asked, though she already knew the answer. She had asked him the same question several times in the past few days. Thomas shook his head, his expression grim. No, no one's willing to help. Jacob has too many connections. It's as though he's always one step ahead of us. Emily sat down, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. So, we're on our own. Thomas sat beside her, his eyes filled with the kind of exhaustion that only came from battling something bigger than oneself. "I don't want to see you hurt, Emily, but if we don't act now, we might not have another chance." Emily's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "I'm afraid it's already too late. Jacob's making his move tonight. He's coming for you and we don't have any way to stop him," Thomas said, his voice tight. "We have to leave. Now. Before it's too late." The words hit her like a cold wave. Leave? How could she leave her home, the place that had been hers for so many years? It felt like running away, like abandoning everything she had worked for. But she knew deep down that Thomas was right. They had to act fast. Just as Emily was about to speak, the door swung open with a loud creak. Clara stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "They're here," she whispered. Emily's stomach dropped. She hadn't expected this. She had thought they had more time. But Jacob had arrived early, and he was already at their doorstep. Thomas stood up immediately, his face hardening. "Get to the back door. We don't have much time." Clara, though visibly frightened, nodded and moved quickly. Emily hesitated, glancing around the room as if trying to take in every detail one last time. She had spent so many years here, building a life she thought was secure. Now, in a matter of days, it was all falling apart. "Emily," Thomas's voice cut through her thoughts. "We need to go, now." The urgency in his tone was enough to snap her out of her trance. She followed Clara toward the back door, but just as she reached for the handle, a loud knock echoed through the house. The sound was deliberate, as though Jacob was announcing his arrival in the most menacing way possible. Emily's heart pounded. She had no idea how he had found them, or how he had known they were about to leave. But there was no time to figure it out. She had to get out, or they were done. "Go," Thomas ordered, shoving Emily and Clara ahead of him. They ran out the back door, their feet pounding on the cold ground as they made their way toward the old shed at the edge of the property. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. They couldn't risk being seen. As they reached the shed, Emily's mind raced. She had to think. There had to be a way out of this, some way to stop Jacob without losing everything. But it felt as though the walls were closing in on her. Suddenly, a voice cut through the silence. "Emily, I know you're out here." It was Jacob. She froze. The sound of his voice sent a chill through her body. It wasn't just the tone, it was the certainty in it, as though he knew he was about to win. And Emily realized with a sinking feeling that he had always been one step ahead. Thomas turned to face her, his expression grim. "Stay here," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'll handle this." Emily wanted to protest, wanted to demand that they leave now, but she knew Thomas was right. She had to stay hidden. If Jacob saw her, it would be over. She watched, heart in her throat, as Thomas moved cautiously toward the door, preparing for the confrontation that would likely determine their fate. The air between them crackled with tension, and then the door swung open. Jacob stood there, his figure dark against the dimming sky, his eyes cold and calculating. "I've been waiting for you," Jacob said, his voice smooth, almost casual. Thomas didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a step forward. His jaw clenched. Emily could see the anger in his posture. It was the first time she had seen him truly furious, and it scared her. "What do you want?" Thomas demanded. Jacob smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What I've always wanted, Thomas. Control." And with those words, Emily felt a tremor in her chest. Jacob was done playing games. It was no longer about money or power. It was about taking everything from them, piece by piece. And the fight for her life was only just beginning. The night was thick with tension, and the cool air seemed to freeze every movement. Emily could hear the distant rustle of the wind as Thomas faced Jacob. Standing on the threshold of the shed, their eyes locked in a battle of wills. It was a showdown that had been building for weeks, but now it was here, the moment of truth. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she crouched low behind the shed, hiding in the shadows with Clara. They were so close now, yet so far from safety. She couldn't see Thomas or Jacob anymore, but the heavy silence outside told her everything she needed to know. Something was about to break, something irreversible. She held her breath, praying for a miracle, for Thomas to come back to her, for everything to turn out right. But in her gut she felt it. This was the moment that would decide their fate. "Get out of the way, Thomas," Jacob's voice came, eerily calm, as if he had already won. Thomas remained still, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "I won't let you take anything more from us." "Jacob," he said, his voice unwavering. Jacob's smile widened, but there was something almost sinister about it. "You don't have a choice. You never did. Everything here, every piece of land, every possession, even Emily, it was always mine. You were just a placeholder." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Emily knew Jacob had always been ruthless, but to hear him say it so plainly, as if he were entitled to everything she had worked for, sent a cold shiver down her spine. "I never wanted to fight you," Thomas said, his voice softening but still firm. "But I will, if that's what it takes." Jacob took a slow step forward, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Then you're already lost." There was a sudden shift in the air. Emily's eyes widened as she strained to hear what was happening. Was Thomas about to do something drastic? Was Jacob going to hurt him? But it wasn't just about Thomas anymore. It was about her. It was about her life and her home, and everything she had worked so hard to protect. Emily had been passive for too long. The power had always been in her hands, yet she had let herself be pushed aside, thinking she had no control. But now, as she sat there in the dark, watching it unfold, something within her snapped. She couldn't wait for someone else to save her anymore. She needed to act, or everything would be lost. Without thinking, Emily sprang from her hiding place, her feet pounding the ground as she ran toward the confrontation. She could hear Clara shouting her name behind her, but she didn't stop. She had to reach them before it was too late. "Emily, no!" Thomas's voice broke through the noise just as she reached the threshold of the shed. Jacob turned in surprise, his eyes widening as he saw her approach. Well, well, the lady finally decides to show up. Emily stood tall, her legs shaking from the adrenaline, but her resolve stronger than ever. "I'm not going to let you take anything from me," she said, her voice loud and clear. "Not my home, not my life, and definitely not my future." Jacob's eyes narrowed, and for a moment it seemed as though he didn't know how to respond. Emily had been the one thing he hadn't counted on. He thought he could control her, manipulate her, break her down. But here she was, standing in front of him, determined and unbroken. "You think you can just change things, don't you?" Jacob sneered. "You've always been weak, Emily. You always let people walk all over you. Now you think you can stand up to me?" But Emily didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Thomas, still standing by the door, looked at Emily with a mix of awe and concern. "What are you doing?" Emily didn't take her eyes off Jacob. "I'm taking control. This ends tonight." The world seemed to stand still as Emily and Jacob locked eyes. For a brief moment, it was as though time had paused. There was a tangible energy in the air, a clash of wills that no one could deny. Jacob took a step forward, but Emily didn't back down. "You'll never have what's mine," she said, her voice steady. "I will fight for it, for everything I've built, and for everyone I love, and I'm not doing it alone." Thomas stepped forward, finally standing by her side. His face set in determination. "You're right. You don't have to do this alone. We're in this together." Clara emerged from the shadows behind them, her expression filled with a quiet strength. "We've got your back," she said, her voice strong despite her earlier fear. Jacob looked around, momentarily stunned by the show of unity. It was a sight he had never expected to see. The power he thought he held was slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "You think this changes anything?" Jacob hissed. "You think you can just throw me out?" Emily nodded, her voice unwavering. "Yes, I do." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a final, furious glare, Jacob turned on his heel and stormed off, vanishing into the night. His footsteps faded into the distance, and with each step, the hold he had on their lives seemed to weaken. Emily stood there, breathless, the weight of everything that had happened crashing down on her. She had faced the monster, and she had won. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly free. Thomas came up behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with relief. Clara smiled, her eyes still wide with amazement. "You did it, Emily. You took control." Emily looked around at the people who had stood by her, who had helped her fight when she thought all hope was lost. It was more than just surviving. It was about finding her voice, her strength, and she had done that. In the end, she hadn't needed to fight alone.